kind of attitude is a difficult one, but we need to find a way to move more quickly, to try to learn and experiment in areas that we don't understand. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The third one is about business model innovation. When we boil these things down, and we'll talk about what we mean by a business model in a second, the way in which we think about the values we offer to the customers we serve and how we deliver those values, how we work with partners in order to deliver the value, what kinds of activities we perform, and how we see the financial flow, what costs we have and what revenues we have and how those relate. That's the business model. Those elements and that flow and that dynamic approach is the business model around what we're doing. How do we start to do some innovation in that? How can we look at new ways of thinking about the business and the business model? And there's a lot going on in this space right now, as you know, and we'll talk a little bit more about that perhaps than the others. And finally, I wanted to talk about Agile a little bit. It's overplayed, this word, but what I'm really interested in is Agile as a way of providing a way of creating experiments that can be brought into an organization quickly, evolved, learned from, and moved into a new form. So Agile software delivery and DevOps, which this is the idea of moving from development to operations quickly, and the relationship between those. The most important thing, so in a sense, these are the four big areas that I talk to people about a lot. But the way I often talk about this is, you know, this idea of success is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. This is the 1%. The 99% is, you've got to try to make this happen in your organization. And then you start to deal with people. And then it gets really interesting. Your management, your peers, the guys who have a rivalry with you, the financial controllers, the accountants, the lawyers, the teams that you're working with. And it gets, as we know, much more interesting and complicated when you're trying to change behaviors than it does trying to change technologies and trying to change ways of working. So we'll talk a little bit about change management, but I just, again, want to emphasize that does not go away with any change. That's why the big talk right now in business is about digital transformation, where they don't understand what digital means and they don't understand what transformation is, so they put both words together. It kind of helps that way. So we're going through that in business because they recognize that the change that's happening is about the technology, but it's also about the organization and the people. And the combination of that is really causing a lot of harm in businesses right now. So let's talk a little bit about, at least see where we get in some of these. Design thinking. The design thinking approach, particularly from the Stanford D School point of view, looks at these areas. I know, having worked for IBM and seeing IBM as one of the main sponsors, IBM has a very interesting set of ideas also about design thinking and the way in which it's put together its design studios. And they have some nice examples of how they think about design and approaches. And it's based on a lot of this kind of work, where you empathize, design, ideate, prototype, test, and they go through these cycles very quickly and try to understand from the external point of view how things work. And a lot of it is building very low fidelity prototypes, things out of cardboard, things out of paper, things that are put together very quickly using software tools that allow you to build wireframes and other things. The basis on which this needs to operate, though, is a different sort of value system. Rather than me go into what does a customer journey look like and how do I design a persona, which is a little bit old hat, what I'd like to do is think a little bit about one of these key words, which is value. What do people value? And a lot of the questions that we're asking when we go create a new product, create a new service is, where's the value? And it's quite a complicated question. So let me take a simple example before I dive into this chart. What does this cost? Or what's its value? So there's two ways of looking at this. One is value in exchange. What will you pay for this? So I give you this, you give me money. So in a supermarket, it's £1, maybe, euro. Probably the same thing these days. But if I go to a football match, a soccer match, I'll pay £5. But I wouldn't dream of paying £5 for it in a supermarket. So there's something about context. It's not just about what it costs to produce and the cost of the plastic and so on. In the United States, there's a thing where they have bottles like this, and in little letters at the bottom it says PWS. And it stands for public water source, meaning it just came out of the tap, which is quite funny. So the fact that it's plastic and it got shipped and there's all sorts of cost. So that's one way to think about the cost of this. The other is to say it's where it gets sold. If it's at a soccer game, if I'm dying in the desert, if I'm sharing this with somebody, if it's to take a tablet with, it's value in use, which is different from value in exchange. And as soon as we start to think about things like that, you start to get into very interesting things like Uber and surge pricing and being able to think about what's the value of something right now. If I understand where the demand is, which you can now with new technologies, where the sources of supply are, if I can change the system and manipulate the system to understand and manage supply and demand, and I can control that through pricing, that becomes very interesting. So in the university, for example, we have a big lecture theatre like this, and outside is a coffee place. On the hour, when the lecture theatre lets out, you can imagine what the queue is like in the coffee place. So I say to them, why don't you charge double on the hour for coffee? And they say, what? Well, there's huge demand on the hour when people come out of... You don't want a queue of 50 people where 49 aren't being served. So charge double. That would reduce the queue. And you get more money. We can't do that. Why can't you do that? It's not allowed. Why isn't it allowed? Well, they wouldn't like it. Why wouldn't they like it? More people, the people who want to pay, who are desperate for coffee, will pay £2 rather than £1. Now, am I manipulating the system, or am I taking advantage of the system? Am I smoothing the system? Is it immoral? So we start to get into different value situations where we start to think about this. So traditionally, the way we've thought about this is functionally. So if I wanted to produce something and say, where's the value? I could say, does it save you time? Does it simplify? Does it make money? Does it reduce risk? Does it help organize things? Does it help integrate things that weren't before? Does it help connect things that were remote? Does it help reduce effort? Does it avoid hassle? These are all functional, interesting functional values, functional needs. But what's interesting is we're starting to move up. This is very Maslow's hierarchy. As we move up to emotional, it could be, does this, so for example, using apps that tell you whether your train's late or whether you should take the bus or the train. A lot of that is about reducing anxiety. It's not really a functional thing. It's about, will I get home for the babysitter? Will I be late for dinner? Will I miss my meeting? It's about anxiety, and people pay for, value, reducing anxiety. Nostalgia. Does it make me remind myself of when I was young and trendy and could stay out all night drinking? Those sorts of things, again, people are more interested in value, nostalgia kind of ideas. I won't go through all of them, but you get the idea. Is where the value lies is not always at the functional level, and in fact often isn't. And it's trying to understand and play with these things and dive in. There's a very interesting set of work by Clay Christensen, who's a Harvard professor, called Jobs to be Done, where you try to get under the surface of any sort of analysis in this kind of design thinking point of view and say, what's the real job to be done here? What is it that's really going on? Let's get below the surface of what they're doing and why they're doing and what they would do as an alternative to this. So design thinking is that way of thinking, and there are some really interesting techniques beginning to emerge. The second part I wanted to mention is, in the end, of course, it's about business models, and in particular, some emerging ways of thinking about business models. One of the most interesting aspects of business models that has emerged in the last few years is this focus on platform-based business models. And platform-based business models tend to be these multi-sided markets, where you're looking at the dynamics between supply and demand. And then also the third way, which is people who are looking at this flow between supply and demand and trying to understand behaviors and trying to find value in those behaviors. So let's take an example, a simple example, perhaps slightly too simplified, but a simple example. So when you go and you pull up Google and you do a Google search, what do you pay to do the Google search? Well, the answer is, at one level, nothing. You don't pay to search for something. On the other hand, again, the phrase I might use is, whenever you do something and it's free, the product is you. You are the product. When you're searching, the fact that you're searching, when you searched, how you searched, what you did next, what you did beforehand, what the people in your building searched for at the same time you searched, that's what the product is. The product is you. And that is a really interesting product for Google because they can make a lot of value out of that. And that's what's happening in many of these organizations where when you think about Google as a platform, it's other things as well. But when you think about it as a platform, that becomes a really interesting model of how they think about what they are, who they are, how they think about their dynamics, why they want more people using their browsers than other people's browsers. The dynamics of these network business models is really quite interesting. And there's a lot of theory being developed around what the dynamics of these models are, and coring and tipping, and the ways in which you create value in these models. So how do we start to think about playing around in models? And there's a lot of different theories and ideas. The one that's become almost the de facto way of thinking, particularly from a development experimentation point of view, is called the business model canvas. Can I just see, how many people know about business model canvas and Osterwald and Pinho? Oh, most, good. So this is a very straightforward technique I won't go into in much detail if you all know this, but it's a very simple technique that says, what are the 9 key elements of a business model? And how can we lay those out in a very straightforward way in order to think about the dynamics of what's going on in any particular situation? And you can lay them out in various ways. This is the canvas, the picture, that is used by Osterwald and Pinho and the people who support the business model canvas. And this is their company strategizer, where you'll find lots of templates and ideas. And most of this is in Creative Commons, so it's usable. And what's interesting about this is immediately it gives some very straightforward, palpable techniques for people to be able to bring ideas out. So you can imagine I'm in a business school, I'm in a university, so I get lots of students coming up saying, excuse me, professor, I've got this great idea. And you say, oh, your head drops a bit. And you say, great, tell me what's your idea. I'm going to sell pizza on campus. And you think, oh, okay, I might have heard this one before. Okay, tell me your idea. So you want to have a dialogue, a constructive dialogue with somebody with the idea. So you can start off and say, okay, so tell me the value proposition. Tell me the unique selling point. Well, this pizza's going to be different. It's going to have special ingredients and be organic. And okay, who's the customer segment you're going to serve then? Who are these people? Well, it's people who are getting ready for exams. And the big idea is going to be that they'll wear a fitness band, and I've got access to their calendar, and we know the timetable for exams. So they don't even have to order the pizza. The pizza comes to them when they need it to keep them awake to do their revision before the exams. Okay, now I've got a customer segment. How are we going to get the channel? How are you going to get this to them? What channel are you going to use? How will you deliver it to them? We'll get it to the library, we'll work them. So, and then what's this going to cost you? Where are the ingredients going to come from? Will you need ovens? How are we going to produce this? What's the cost structure look like? What do you see as the revenue? Is this a subscription-based model? Do they pay as a transaction model for every pizza? Do they pay based on the outcome? So you only pay if your exam results go up. That might be interesting. We guarantee by being more nourished, your exam results will be better. And you pay if it goes up. If you were a C student and you get an A, you pay double. Okay, that's an interesting business model. Now I'm getting interested. You're telling me things that might be fun. Now we have to go see if there's enough of a market. Now we have to see if you can execute. But now I've got a dialogue, right? Now we're having an interesting conversation, and I'm working through these 9 ideas, and I'm sketching down some things. Now, it still might be a crazy idea. I'm not saying this is the right idea. But it gives me a language. It gives me a set of concepts. It gives me a way of exploring what to do. And that's really valuable. And it's something that we've had before, but has not been as well structured. Now, I'm sure many of you put your hands up have got 100 things you say are not good about the business model canvas, and there are lots of limitations. But from this point of view, it's quite valuable. What's also interesting is we can begin to talk about, in the same way we talk about architectural patterns, we can talk about business model patterns. There are a whole set of really interesting business model patterns that we can start to explore. One of the obvious ones, I could have done dozens of these, but one of the obvious ones is the freemium model. So if I say this is a freemium model, everybody knows what I'm talking about. You give something away to get people to move to your subscription pricing, to your higher level pricing. right? So if Dropbox, for example, or Box, or one of these online storage, you get free storage for everybody up to a certain amount, and if you want to pay for more storage, you get more storage, you become one of their professional users, and they'll have multi-levels and multi-tiers. So what's the big issue in a freemium model? What are you trying to optimize if you say, this is my new idea and I'm going to operate this as a freemium model? What's the big thing you have to focus on? Oh, come on, you didn't drink that much last night. What's the big issue? What do you have to focus on for a freemium model? It's got to be how many people you can get to upgrade to your professional level, right? Because I can give away lots of things. Every time I get a new free user, it costs me. That's not a sustainable model. You know, this is how it started in many businesses where you say, how can this be where they're losing money? What they're doing is they're building capacity to then see how many people they can upgrade. And it's that conversion model from the free to the paid users, that is the telling sign, how many people upgrade and how many people stay on the upgraded path. So we can begin to describe these models, analyze these models, review these models, compare and contrast these models, and we also understand the dynamics of success of these models. So as soon as somebody says, I've got my pizza thing on campus and I'm using a freemium model, we give pizza free for people who will upgrade. Now I know what questions to ask and whether this is likely to succeed or not. And I know what to measure and how to measure it. That becomes really interesting. And it's different for different business models, different business model patterns. And it's about reducing and increasing revenues. So I'd say these business models are interesting, and they give us a way of thinking, but we've still got to think about how do we test a business model? How do we experiment with the business model? Because there are lots and lots of assumptions here that we need to think about. Everything from, do we really understand this user? Are there enough of them? Will they pay enough? How does the influence flow? And there's lots of questions which we can explore. So here we've got our business model and our business model canvas, and we've got a bunch of guesses, hypotheses. Maybe they're guesses that we've got quite a lot of experience in. So typically what we do at this point is we'd say, okay, you've designed your business and your business model, and you've got some idea of it's a freemium model, and you're thinking about how this is going to happen. Where on this are you more confident and where are you less confident? Where do you think you're making the biggest assumptions? How could we learn more about those? So if you say the biggest assumption is whether there are enough students studying for exams that cram the night before who'd want pizza. I still don't know if we've got a big enough pool of people, and it has to be at least several hundred for this to work. Okay, my biggest assumption is I can get to that community. How would we test that? What would be the way in which we could test that and learn the most about that for the minimum possible effort? So what people talk about, of course, is minimum viable products. How could we build something to test that, a minimum viable product, which is about learning about that assumption? What's your hypothesis? That more than 100 people a week are cramming for exams and would eat pizza. So my hypothesis is that they would buy pizza from me in order to, so now I can start to examine how I would test that. So we're trying to find out if there's a customer at all. What most businesses, particularly early stage businesses or new ideas and existing businesses are, is they're a search for a customer. Is there a customer? Is there a customer that we can recognize, that we can manage, that we can control? And given that, can we build a business around it? Can we build a business idea around it? And they're two separate phases. And what most businesses, particularly startup businesses that fail, do is they misunderstand which phase they're in. Are you in the customer understanding phase, or are you in the business building phase? And how do you see those two relating? And how do you understand the dynamics of those two? And a lot of this work comes from Eric Ries and Steve Blank. I particularly recommend the very short paper called Why the Lean Startup Changes Everything. For those of you who write papers, you know, get the big idea out in the title and be bold. It's a very short paper talking about why that model is a very important rethinking of business ideas. And it's captured in Eric Ries's book, who was a student of Steve Blank's, and Eric Ries has a new book coming out right now. So it's very much about a different way of thinking. One way to think about this is, if you're an innovative organization, you have to practice innovation accounting. One of the big ideas is innovation accounting is not classic business operation accounting. Business operation accounting, cash flow, supply and demand, the normal sorts of things. We've got a classic way of thinking about accounting. What we do in different sorts of innovative businesses, think differently. We have to somehow manage our learning. You're focused on the speed of learning and the advantage and use of that learning as it brings to your businesses. And there's lots of ways in which we can do this. I won't go through the techniques, but for many of you with a technology background, of course, there are many techniques that you use in order to try to understand the way in which businesses work. And most businesses are constantly trying out new ideas. So if you go to the example of Google, for example, they're constantly doing hundreds of small experiments. So they can say, given we have so many people looking at our website right now and our search page, could we, for a small number of people in this geography, change it slightly and see if the response is differently? Do they click on more ads? Do they spend more time on our page? Do they navigate differently? And they're constantly running these experiments and trying to understand what the data is showing to them and optimizing their processes as a result of that behavior. So this becomes very interesting. We've now got business models that are being optimized based on data feedback and constantly being experimented with. So how do we drive that dynamic approach into the business models, and how do we take account of those? And to a large degree, a lot of the interest in algorithms and AI and machine learning, machine intelligence, is about our ability to include that kind of dynamic approach into the business processes, customer-facing and back-office and internal processes. That constant learning, that ability to use data in more effective ways, to understand why spikes in behavior are occurring and to respond to those in real time, to learn from them, to adapt the processes to what's going on, to reject various things if they start to affect other parts of the process that we didn't expect. Our ability to do that and to ingest large amounts of data to look at the patterns that are occurring is a real discriminating factor now in most organizations. And it's growing. And this is sort of the surge of interest in artificial intelligence in its broader sense. In order to do this, we have to be able to deliver quickly. So a lot of the work that's going on around agile development and Scrum-based methods and so on, as we've kind of indicated in this little diagram, is because we need to move very quickly between the ideas that we have and our ability to deliver into an existing situation. So agile methods and approaches used in this way are experimental techniques to build software, get it out into the field, see what the response is, evolve it, learn from it, throw it away, do something new. And as I mentioned, we've got to build completely different management models around this to be able to survive and to be able to evolve to support it. But the last 2 minutes before I finish, I just want to spend on why this is difficult for organizations. So here's just one example. These are some of the major innovation companies that we see, talked about as major innovators. And look at the statement that's the summary here. The role of culture had a larger impact on innovation than innovation strategy, business strategy, deep customer insight, great talent, and the right execution of capabilities. That's quite a strong statement here. So a lot of time is being spent right now trying to say, so what is the culture of Google? What is the culture of Microsoft? What is the culture of IBM? What is the culture of smaller organizations? And why are they so important? So there are a couple of interesting things coming back, three things. After 25 years being away from the UK, coming back to the UK was a bit of a shock. After a large amount of time in industry, coming back to academia was a bit of a shock. And coming into a business school was a really interesting shock. Two things. First of all, again, I don't mean to offend lots of people, but it shocked me how little business schools know about business, first of all, which was quite a surprise. But the second thing that was interesting about being part of a business school is that they seem to project that they know a lot about how business works. But in fact, my assessment, having been there a couple of years, is they know quite a lot about a small amount of business. And everything they don't understand, they say, oh, that's culture. That's the big bucket called culture. which is sort of the let's sweep it under the carpet because we're not quite sure what's going on. And this is the part that has a large impact on our ability to operate and to change and to see the effects of what we do, swept under the management rug. And that, to me, is really interesting. And it's under that rug because it's hard. It involves people, it involves technology, it involves behaviors, it involves psychology, it involves so many things. So we have to start to tease this out. And of course, there's nothing wrong with classic change management theories. All of the work of Kotter and his 8 steps and the Lewin force field model. And there's lots of interesting change models. But you look at those and you say, let's take the Kotter's steps. You've got to recognize there's a problem. You've got to form a coalition. All of these steps. How does that work in an agile world with all of these changes going on, with new technologies appearing quickly, with a completely different value set, with people communicating in new ways? How does that work then? And the answer is we don't really know. We know it's not the way we've seen change occurring in this sort of systematic way in most organizations. But we're not quite sure what the dynamics of change are. And this is causing huge, huge issues. So when we look at organizations going through these kinds of changes, often under this banner of digital transformation, as I mentioned, what we see is a number of things that you probably could have predicted without a 17-month study and lots of money being spent. But this is the kind of thing we see. And when I talk to organizations, they all nod their heads. Slow or stalled decision-making caused by internal politics and other sorts of things. So one of the things that has to happen in most organizations, we're moving into a more agile, rapid world, right? Yeah. And new changes are happening, yeah. So how's your decision-making process then? How quick is it? So often I get called in and said, can you help us be agile? And I say, okay. So you can come at this from several angles. One angle is to say, tell me, how long would it take if I wanted to hire somebody into a team? How long would it take if you needed to negotiate a new supplier contract? What would it be if we wanted to do an NDA between 2 companies? And you ask some of these, and the answers aren't usually hours. They aren't usually days. You're lucky if they're weeks. And you say, so what do you think agile means then? Oh, well, we thought you'd just train a few people in Scrum. Yeah, we could do that, and then we can count how many people are Scrum certified because they went on a 1-week course. We could do that. Do you think it would change much? And you have to start to get sort of dig in. And then the business value, this idea of ROI and what is ROI. And if you measure things the same way, we've got 20 years of lines of code development and how we measure our productivity and how many hours people spend on projects and so on. And we've got to keep all that and manage all of that, and we want to be agile. Well, how do the two fit? The technology focus we've talked about, it's about more to do with people and management. The operational issues, there's also this idea where you get 5 guys with ponytails saying, you know what, we should burn the whole place down. We could do all of that in a week on AWS. And then these guys who've been building this for 20 years say, you can do what? And there's this interesting clash between what's possible and what's feasible. And we've got to start to understand that because the theories and the practices really are not working well. And of course, the final one is about the control structures. Lots of these things really challenge. You mean that 19-year-old there knows more than the 55-year-old over here? This idea of death of experience. The last thing you want to do is employ somebody who's been working on something for 20 years. On the other hand, you can't have people who don't understand the environment in which you operate. So how is that going to work? We're really struggling a little bit right now, even how to employ people. If I come along and say, I'm just right for you, I've worked in this business for 20 years, you say, yeah, but you know how it used to work. Are you the person we need to know how it will work? It's not, how do you do that as a person who wants to have a career? How do you do that as an employer? How do you do that as an organization managing and responsible for the delivery of product and services and so on? These things are becoming very much more complicated. So these are the things that I think you probably would have known if we hadn't even had this conversation. So what I wanted to do just in summary is give you a kind of broader perspective, help you to think a little bit more broadly around, as we think about business processes, business process change, business process management, the languages we use, not just to describe and automate processes, but to communicate them, to support them, to think about experimentation in business processes. We're placing ourselves in a wider environment that's really struggling right now, that could really do with a lot of help. And a lot of what we've spent our time on as a community, the kinds of things I've worked on in the past, the kinds of things that you're working on now, have a lot to bear on these problems. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to make a difference. And I hope this has helped think about that.